In 1607, 3 English ships crossed this violent ocean, carrying dreams of wealth, survival, and empire. Their destination was Virginia, a distant coastline England hoped would become the foundation of permanent power. From this fragile wooden fort, 13 colonies would eventually emerge, but survival was never guaranteed. Across generations, settlement became prosperity, prosperity became control, and control eventually produced open rebellion. The mystery is not simply how Britain ruled America, but how Britain created the resistance that destroyed its rule.
After months at sea, the settlers entered Chesapeake Bay and searched for a defensible place to build.
They carried weapons, tools, and expectations of quick wealth, but little understanding of the land. The settlers built for attack from European rivals, yet their greatest enemies would be hunger and disease. The English had not entered empty land. They had entered a region governed by powerful indigenous communities.
Trade offered temporary cooperation, yet mistrust, cultural misunderstanding, and competition for land remained dangerously close.
Brackish water, mosquitoes, poor sanitation, and unfamiliar diseases turned the settlement into a place of death. During the starving time, empty storehouses and isolation pushed Jamestown to the edge of extinction. By spring, only a fraction remained alive, and England's first permanent colony nearly vanished. Tobacco transformed Virginia, creating export wealth and giving investors a powerful reason to keep Jamestown alive. Profit demanded more land and labor, pushing plantations outward and intensifying conflict across the region. In 1619, elected representatives met in Virginia, beginning a powerful colonial tradition of local political participation.
That year also recorded the arrival of captive Africans, foreshadowing an expanding system of racial slavery. Self-government expanded for some colonists, while forced labor and exclusion became foundations of colonial prosperity.
During the 17th century, English settlements multiplied along the coast, developing into 13 politically distinct colonies. In New England, towns gathered around churches and meeting houses, linking religion, community, and local government. Regular meetings taught many colonists to vote, argue, tax themselves, and challenge leaders they distrusted. Ports connected colonial merchants to an Atlantic economy of commodities, credit, migration, and human exploitation. Pennsylvania attracted settlers of varied languages and faiths, creating one of Britain's most diverse colonial societies. Southern export wealth increasingly depended on enslaved African knowledge, labor, and lives controlled through violence. Imperial trade generated wealth, but Britain expected colonial commerce to serve the empire's larger economic interests.
Trade restrictions encouraged smuggling, bribery, and a colonial habit of treating imperial rules as negotiable.
Colonial assemblies repeatedly challenged governors, defending powers they believed experience and custom had already made legitimate.
British America existed within a continent contested by European empires and sovereign indigenous nations. Native nations negotiated alliances strategically, using diplomacy and military power to defend their own interests.
The colonies remained divided, yet generations of local government had already taught them political independence in practice. By 1754, British and French expansion collided in the Ohio Valley, turning rivalry into war.
Young colonial troops entered the frontier, where limited intelligence and tense encounters could trigger a wider conflict. The frontier war depended on alliances, surprise, terrain, and political choices made by many different nations. A local confrontation quickly expanded, beginning the North American phase of a far larger imperial war. The struggle became the 7 Years' War, fought across oceans and continents by competing global empires. Victory required soldiers, roads, food, transport, and money on a scale the colonies had never experienced. Imperial warfare devastated frontier communities, displacing civilians and deepening cycles of fear, retaliation, and mistrust. In 1763, Britain emerged victorious, removing France as its principal imperial rival in mainland North America.
Britain now controlled a vast territory, but governing and defending that victory created enormous new responsibilities.
Britain had won an empire, but the war left the government carrying a vast and politically dangerous debt. The Proclamation of 1763 attempted to restrict settlement west of the Appalachians and reduce frontier conflict. Settlers and land speculators viewed the restriction as betrayal after fighting for access to Western territory. British ministers concluded that the colonies should help finance the troops and administration protecting the empire. For indigenous nations, colonial expansion threatened homelands, sovereignty, resources, and survival far beyond Britain's legal boundaries. New duties appeared modest in London, yet colonists viewed them as evidence of expanding parliamentary control. Stricter enforcement made imperial authority visible in daily commerce and intensified resentment among colonial merchants. Printers transformed local complaints into shared political arguments that traveled rapidly from colony to colony.
3,000 miles separated Parliament from people who had no elected representatives inside that institution.
The Stamp Act taxed printed materials that touched business, law, news, entertainment, and everyday colonial life. Resistance became organized and intimidating, forcing many stamp distributors to resign before the law took effect. Merchants used boycotts to transform consumer choices into economic pressure against Parliament and British manufacturers. Public rituals, effigies, and liberty symbols turned political resistance into a powerful form of street theater. Political debate moved beyond assemblies, turning taverns and workshops into classrooms of resistance and constitutional argument. A simple slogan captured the dispute. Taxation required political consent, not distant authority imposed without representation. Parliament repealed the Stamp Act, and colonists celebrated as though constitutional resistance had secured a lasting victory. Yet Parliament simultaneously declared its authority complete, preserving the constitutional conflict beneath the temporary celebration. When British troops entered Boston, military power became a daily presence inside an already hostile civilian community. Crowded streets produced insults, employment disputes, and confrontations between soldiers and residents who deeply resented them. On a freezing March night, insults and fear gathered around one sentry until restraint began collapsing. Shots erupted, 5 colonists died, and a chaotic confrontation became one of resistance's most enduring symbols. Patriot propagandists simplified the confusion, presenting the shooting as deliberate military violence against helpless civilians. Committees of correspondence connected distant communities, allowing local disputes to become a coordinated intercolonial resistance movement. The Tea Act brought Company Tea into Boston, testing whether colonists would accept Parliament's taxing authority.
Accepting the tea might lower prices, but resistance leaders argued it would surrender the principle of consent.
On December 16th, protesters boarded 3 ships and converted political resistance into direct destruction of property. 342 tea chests entered the harbor, creating a spectacle Britain could not ignore.
British leaders treated the destruction as open defiance and decided that Boston required unmistakable punishment.
The coercive acts closed Boston Harbor, threatening livelihoods and demonstrating how imperial punishment could reach an entire population.
Massachusetts lost important political powers, convincing many colonists that their own assemblies might be targeted next.
Britain intended to isolate Boston, but punishment instead encouraged colonies to recognize a shared political danger. Delegates from 12 colonies gathered in Philadelphia, creating a political forum broader than any previous colonial assembly.
The delegates disagreed over methods, but they increasingly accepted that collective action was essential for colonial rights.
While politicians petitioned, local militia quietly gathered weapons and prepared for the possibility of armed confrontation. Before sunrise on April 19th, British troops marched to seize military supplies and detain resistance leaders. At Lexington, armed colonists faced professional soldiers, while neither side fully controlled what would happen next. No one proved who fired first, but that unidentified shot closed the road back to peace. At Concord, the search for supplies drew increasing militia forces from towns throughout the surrounding countryside.
The British retreat became a running battle as militia attacked repeatedly along the road toward Boston.
At Bunker Hill, inexperienced defenders held their ground through repeated assaults before ammunition finally failed. Britain captured the ground, but severe losses proved that suppressing the rebellion would demand an extraordinary price. Even after bloodshed, Congress sent one final petition asking the king to restore peace and colonial rights. Congress chose George Washington to command a continental army intended to unite forces from separate colonies.
The king rejected reconciliation and declared the colonies in rebellion, convincing many that compromise had reached its end.
Thomas Paine's common sense attacked monarchy directly and made independence understandable to an enormous popular audience. An idea once considered radical rapidly became practical. The colonies could build a nation without a king. Inside a sealed chamber, delegates weighed military danger, political uncertainty, and the irreversible consequences of independence. In July 1776, Congress approved a declaration transforming resistance to British authority into a revolution for independence.
Public readings gave the Declaration a human audience, while royal symbols fell and former subjects imagined citizenship.
Independence emerged from civil division, enslaved people's choices, indigenous resistance, American endurance, and decisive French intervention. The Treaty of Paris ended British rule, but struggles over liberty, slavery, representation, and indigenous land continued.